So you got little seeds of resentment that build up in the relationship, and you get little seeds of your own insecurities and fears and all these things that never really get talked about. And that's what the enemy loves to do. He loves to keep it all in the dark so that over time, very slowly, it's a slow fade, very slowly, there's a disconnection. And very slowly, these walls come up. And the very thing that you're longing for from your spouse is the very thing you're shutting down in your spouse. And it just creates this cycle over and over again. And then we criticize each other about the very things that we desire, but we're also in the process of shutting it down, and it creates a cycle.
I won't lose hope in the night when the fire's growing dim. I'll just let go and I'll try. Help me walk this road and find my way back home. Find my way back home. Find my way home.
Welcome back to the Famous Know podcast. We welcome you to season 5 of the Famous Know podcast. I think it's season 5. I mean, we've been doing this thing for many, many years. And
I was like,
since we have
Season
restarted the brand and restarted everything, we have started doing seasons. And part of that reason is because we want to group them into topics so that it's helpful for you, the listener, to know, and for us to say, hey, people have come up to us and said, hey, do you have a podcast on this topic?
Right,
And
true.
now we can categorize them and organize them to go, oh yeah, go back to season 1, go back to season 2. We definitely have it on that. And so this series we want to welcome you to here over the summer. We are talking about relational intelligence, and we have a number of quote unquote hot topics that we will be specifically talking about as it relates to relational intelligence. What is relational intelligence? And it's going to get awesome. We're going to be talking about a lot of fun topics. But the reason is because we want to grow in relational intelligence. We want to grow in understanding what it means to have deep, meaningful relationships. Because at the end of the day, it is everything. It is absolutely everything. Our lives ebb and flow. The quality of our lives ebb and flow on the quality of our relationships. And how free we feel, how alive we feel, how connected we feel, how seen we feel is a reflection of those relationships and how well we cultivate them. And so that's what this is all about. And today's episode, we're specifically starting on the topic of marriage.
marriage is what brings us together today. I was reading in John this morning, and I was reading out of the Passion Translation, and it was talking about God being like he was one, but he was face to face. So it's talking about like the Trinity being face to face with one another. And this has been this repeated thing where like later in John, where Jesus comes back in like, I think it's John 20 or 21, where he says, and he literally breathes the Holy Spirit into his disciples. And in the translation, it says like he was face to face with them. And I think this relational component is so much of what we're missing these days, and the heart cry of so many people, because we're functioning like robots in some ways, like with our to-do lists, and we're just like stumbling through our lives at the expense of relationship. And we are missing the point, I think. And maybe not the point. I think cognitively we know the point, and I think in a lived out way, we're missing the joy of relationship.
Well, I think what's happened is we've gotten numb.
Yeah.
We've gotten numbed. What the enemy wants to do is the enemy subtly comes into your life, and he begins to slowly wear away at your heart. He begins to slowly wear away at your soul by making you believe things that aren't true and asking questions. You have to understand that the enemy and the demons know the scriptures better than we do, and they use it against us. And I mean, the enemy did that against Jesus in the desert. And so they know the word of God. And what ends up happening is it goes all the way back to Adam, Genesis, where the enemy comes in. Actually, it was with Eve first, and just starts asking questions. And it's always about the character of God. Is he really? Is he really? And what ends up happening is that happens in our own lives. If God is really this loving, he wouldn't have put me in a family that treated me the way that it did.
Mm-hmm.
If God is really loving, this wouldn't have happened to me in my childhood. If God is really loving, I wouldn't have gotten let go from my job. If God is really loving, I wouldn't have gotten a divorce. If God is really loving, then my marriage would be stronger. My spouse would see me better. Our finances would be better. If God really loved me, or if God was really present, fill in the blank for you. And I think that is the heart cry for each of us, because that's where we slowly, subtly, whether you want to admit it or not, there's this little annoying voice in the back of your brain that gets you to question the goodness of God, the goodness of who he is. Is he really good? And when you start to question that in your life, and this goes for all of us, what happens is we begin to start to turn to things that will calm and soothe that ache in the back of because we don't want it to be true. We want to believe that he's good, but there's places in our lives where we haven't seen him show up as good. We haven't gotten to see him face to face, or at least we don't experience him face to face. I talk to a lot of men. I talk to a lot of women too on this, but a lot of men in particular where it's like, I don't know that I've ever really experienced God's love. I don't know that I've ever really experienced his presence. And what we end up doing is we ended up turning to the things that we feel to have some sense of calm and soothing in our lives. And over time, what ends up happening, we live in a culture, in a world today, and in a time and an era where there are tons of screens, there are tons of opportunities, tons of things to turn to, as there has been in history past, to numb out. And I think that is where ultimately these relationships tend to go, slowly fade away. Over time, we slowly start, and it happens as a slow fade, and you get to a point where you wake up one day and you realize your marriage isn't as strong as you want it to be. Your relationship with your kids feels like time is running out. You just don't even feel connected to yourself or to God. And you don't know where it went awry. You don't know where the tables turned. And to me, that is, as we think about relational intelligence, I think that's our ache today. That's the trouble, is how do we stop that from happening in our lives? How do we recognize it? How do we take the blinders off? How do the scales come off?
Well, and I think it takes like a waking up, you know. Ben Rector has a new song that just came out called Golden Days. And like, I dare you to listen to that and not cry. Did you cry?
Oh, it wrecked me. I don't know that I actually teared up, but I had a moment. Like, I listened to it right here.
Did you? I listened to it.
I
put it on last night for friends, and like, we're like sobbing. Like, it just is the reality of like,
talk about the song.
We're living in the golden days.
Yeah.
I mean, it is this like reflection of like, I'm going to miss this, you know, these days that like, I wish, you know, I didn't have to pick up your stuff. I wish I didn't, you know, could sleep in. I wish we had more time for this, but I know I'm going to go back and be like, these were the golden days. And I think it takes those moments of clarity where you recognize this time right now has the potential to be like fullness of joy. When Jesus said, like, I came that I might bring like fullness of joy, like, I think we have to actually pause and be like, are we as disciples of Jesus experiencing what he came and paid for, or are we living in less? Because I was sitting outside yesterday and I felt the Lord say, I want you to ask me for the more. And then it was like specific, more of like all of these things that he had asked. Like, I want you to ask me for the more. And I think we get so complacent. Like, I guess this is it. I guess this is good enough. I guess this is as good of a marriage or relationship with my children or as a family or relationship with God. Like, I can't tell you how many women I sit with and it's like, well, yeah, but it's like we've lost the courage to want again, to ask, to dare to hope. And I'm not saying that that's even like I understand it. Like from my lens of that makes perfect sense, actually, why we've lost that. We're terrified. We've been so decimated by the spirit of despair, I think, as not just like over the earth. Like I think the enemy has just poured out this, I remember John Eldredge called it the spirit of desolation, of just this, this is it is. I guess this is all there is. I guess this is enough. And I feel like it takes an agitation, something to get in there and agitate it enough to wake it up, wake you up, wake me up, that we're like, wait, I don't want this. Like, I don't want to live my life as if it's the hamster wheel or Groundhog Day. Remember that movie?
Mm-hmm.
I want, give me the bravery to ask for the more. And so I think that just intersects so beautifully with what we're talking about with relationships, because so often I think we settle for where things are at because we're so weary that we're tired. This has been hard. We've been hurt before. I don't know if it's worth trying. And at the same time, I think we want to be the voices to be that agitation to say, but there is more.
Yeah.
And it's for you too. God is no respecter of persons. He will not do for one what he's not do for another. Like there is a love poured out that is equal, but it's also proportionate to what we ask. And I think there are so many that are missing because they're not asking. When it says, those that hunger and thirst for righteousness shall be filled. We have to hunger. We have to thirst. There is a longing or a yearning that comes first before provision, before pour out or abundance. And we don't like that part because that feels helpless. And we feel like the little, not in control humans that we are. Like that's true. And we don't like to feel like that. We like to feel powerful and competent. And this is a different way. And it's going to require entering life like a child again.
And I think what you have to do is think about what is relational intelligence as we get into this. And, because we're going to talk about relational intelligence in a number of different ways over the course of this series and in this season, particularly as it relates to obviously marriage today. We're going to talk about it in relation to kids. We're going to talk about it in relation to a relationship with God ultimately. But, this sense of agitation, it's like one of the reasons we describe it as a relational intelligence is because we want to filter relational intelligence through the lens of, okay, so we know what intelligence is. We know what IQ is. That's cognitive intelligence. We know what emotional intelligence is. Emotional intelligence is your ability to know what you're feeling and why you're feeling that way, and what another person is feeling and why they're feeling that way, and the ability, therefore, to know how to interact with that person and have mutual beneficial part of that relationship. Now, emotional intelligence can also, the trouble with emotional intelligence is it requires motivation and other factors. And we want to make sure that we're bringing the Word of God, the Spirit of God into the conversation that in such a way brings benefit to the entire relationship. And there are times where, and this is where we talk about relational intelligence, is we want to make sure that the Holy Spirit is brought into the conversation, because that's where we are awakened to being great friends. That's where we are awakened to being great spouses. That's where we're awakened to being great parents. That is this whole part that Christy's talking about, where it's like, I need to be agitated a bit. But we live in a culture where we all go home to our own homes and we turn on screens. We don't sit on our front porches anymore. Relationships are not seen as being as valuable as they used to be in our culture. So we're so individualized that relational connection, particularly multi-generational relational connection, is devalued in our culture. And what's happening is we're therefore then more isolated than we've ever been. And what we're feeding our souls is coming through screens, not through relationships, not through that face-to-face that Christy's talking about. And so it numbs us out even more and numbs us out even more and numbs us out even more. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about throughout this season is we're going to be talking about sex. We're going to be talking about screens. I feel like I'm on an S roll here. We're going to be talking about the things that have been distorted or that are distorting how we come alive and how we enter into relationships, and what's preventing us from true joy. And so that's what we're getting ourselves into. By the way, we are, before we jump into the topic on marriage specifically, I want to highlight a few things we have coming up. Tender and Fierce Summer Cohort is now officially launched. If you didn't get in and you want to get in, there will be a fall cohort coming up. You can check out the show notes for what is coming up in the fall. We also are doing marriage coaching. We do marriage intensives where you come to us for 3.5 days and we sit with you and enter into your world and coach you into having a marriage that you love. And so if that's something you'd be interested in, you can check that out in the show notes as well. And then finally, we also are doing marriage cohorts now, just like Tender and Fierce, just like Field Experience, these things. We're doing marriage cohorts because we genuinely see the need for entering into and serving your marriage and doing it well, a marriage that's emotionally and spiritually alive. And that is our heart, bringing your marriage emotionally and spiritually alive. And so if that's something you would be interested in, you can check that out in the show notes. Or if you know somebody who could use that, check it out in the show notes. We would love to come alongside them, come alongside you, and help you have a marriage that comes alive. So that is our heart. And so today we are talking about marriage. We are talking about relational intelligence as it relates to that. And I think as I talk to couples and as we serve couples, as we coach couples all across the world, actually, this seems super universal to me. Mm-hmm. And that is, there are walls that get built in the relationship. So as we think about intelligence, my relational intelligence is my ability to be smart about what's going on in my heart and what's going on in Christy's heart. And to also be smart about all of the other factors that are taking place. Now, what's happening, and then to be able to fight for her heart and be able to enter into her world in a way that brings us unity, connection, and ultimately increases our marital satisfaction. Now, how does that happen when we've got kids running around, we've got a business to run, we've got finances, we've got bills to pay? I mean, fill in the blank for you. You've got a schedule to maintain. You've got all these things. And what happens is these walls go up and we numb out. It's the very thing I talked about in the beginning of the episode. There are ways that the enemy wants to steal, kill, and destroy, and he slowly just nips away at your heart. And then we end up turning to things that build the walls even higher, whether that's pornography, whether that is we just started to, I mean, it can be as sinister or as innocent as just binge watching shows on television. And that's the way that we connect when you're not truly relationally connecting. I mean, it could be a matter of behavioral or chemical drugs that we turn to calm and soothe us that build walls. But what ends up happening is over time, we build walls. And this is where marriage gets really, really difficult, is because I'm going to use myself for an example. Fear would be a great example in my life, where in the past I had fear around certain things. And every time I would get fearful, I would bring that into our marriage, and Christy would lose her mind because she did not like the spirit that I brought into the atmosphere, the way the atmosphere would shift in the house when I'm carrying all this fear. Now, where's the fear coming from? The fear's coming from a sense of insecurity. It's coming from a sense of being not enough. It's coming from a sense of feeling alone, right? So insecurity, not enough, alone. And what ends up happening is then I carry these fears into my relationship with Christy. She gets ticked off about it. And so she puts up a wall and she starts to get short with me. And she starts to, in some cases, maybe even make fun of or be like, what are you doing? Why are you so scared? What is your problem? What is happening? And so what it does then is it just simply reinforces my insecurities. It reinforces the shame that I'm carrying, which puts a wall up. And what we do is we create a pain cycle. And there's a pain cycle that's created in our marriage. This is our dance that's created. And the trouble with marriage, or the hard part about marriage is that I want nothing more than for Christy to see my inner world and everything that I'm carrying and all of the heartache, but all of the joys too. I want her to be able to see all of that. The trouble is she's also dealing with all of her things, and she's dealing with things in ways that I have hurt her in the past that never got resolved because we didn't talk about them or heal them correctly, name them and heal them and forgive them. So you got little seeds of resentment that build up in the relationship, and you get little seeds of your own insecurities and fears and all these things that never really get talked about. And that's what the enemy loves to do. He loves to keep it all in the dark so that over time, very slowly, it's a slow fade, very slowly, there's a disconnection. And very slowly, these walls come up. And the very thing that you're longing for from your spouse is the very thing you're shutting down in your spouse. And it just creates this cycle over and over again. And then we criticize each other about the very things that we desire, but we're also in the process of shutting it down, and it creates a cycle. That's why I believe that marriage is the most sanctifying relationship on the planet, is because we have to cut through the lies. The enemy's lies. We have to cut through the shame. And as Christy was talking about, you will not ignite. We use the word ignite, awaken your eyes, see again, whatever that phrase is for you, ignite your soul, awaken your soul. You will not do that out of shame. Yeah. Nobody can shame you into being awake. Not in any way that will last. Shame will maybe move you along a little bit initially, but it will never get to a point at which it will last. The only thing that will do that is love itself. It is, as Christy said in the book of John, it is love that compels us. It is his love. It is his face-to-face connection. And it has to start there in order for us to, as believers, as disciples of Jesus, go, I want to love you with everything that I've got, because here's the struggle. I want to love Christy in her brokenness, in her broken parts, and the things that she's bringing. But if I have little seeds of resentment still left in there, what will end up happening is that it's a very difficult balance to, can I trust her and have compassion on her at the same time when she's bringing me all this stuff? So how do I enter in with compassion, but also deal with the sense of, do I really trust, or do I feel like I'll be hurt again? And that is a delicate balance that we have to maintain, and it requires that growth over time. And at the end of the day, I see Jesus accelerate this faster than anything else, which is why we share it from a spiritual perspective if you're a believer. But I just now there are ways that you can correct this from emotional intelligence and other practices and tools. But it's accelerated when we surrender our hearts to the Father's love for us, because it says in 1 John, we love because he first loved us. We have an encounter with God, with the Father. We have an encounter with him. When we have an encounter with him and we experience his love, that is what ultimately begins to help us pursue our spouse in a deeper way.
So good. I think I keep hearing the word safety as you're talking, because when we talk about emotional intelligence, you've heard us talk about emotional intelligence a fair bit. But relational intelligence also requires the very same thing, safety, not in the form of physical safety, although that is still important. But in the ways of like, what does that feel like if I'm criticizing, or I am making fun of, or I am like, it creates such a unsafe emotional atmosphere for our marriage, and therefore shuts down both of us actually, but because we're both operating out of fear. And when it says like there is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. And the only way we actually know perfect love is through Jesus. And what's incredible is like Jesus was, if you've heard of attachment research, and Josh, like his doctorate was actually in attachment. And if the basic tenets of it is how we form attachment bonds to our caregivers early in life, form a lot of the way we not just see ourselves, but see others and the world around us. Like, is it safe? Is it unsafe? Am I lovable? Am I able to love others? Am I able to like receive their love? And the only way we're able to receive love is when we've experienced it, like this love without fear. And so for so many of us, we've lived in environments or grown up in relationships that weren't fully safe. And this is where Jesus enters the scene as the perfect attachment figure. So regardless of whether or not your marriage is even safe right now, and I don't mean that physically, if that's the issue, that is red alert. That is red flags. That is not what we're talking about. We are talking about emotional safety. To grow, I believe, into a marriage that you love and enjoy, you have to have a foundation of emotional safety. You have to feel safe being who you are, that you are not pulling back in avoidance, in, walking on eggshells, where you're avoiding, criticism, where you feel that the you that is authentic, that you may not even let other people see because it feels so unsafe, but the you that is inside feels safe enough to come out, to speak, to walk into the room, to say what they need, to assert yourself, to reach for love, to like reach for affirmation, to receive it, like, and pull it toward you. Like, that's all essential, very important. And yet so many of us have grown up in environments where, or are currently living in environments where that's not it's not true. And yet Jesus gets to walk in as the perfect attachment figure. He is safe. He is humble in heart. He is gentle. It says lowly, meaning he goes low to our level. He comes down to us. He does not pride himself and put himself in this position of like, you submit to me. He comes low to us and meets us where we're at. And this is actually where we learn to heal. This is where we learn to like who we really are, because we are fully ourselves with those that we are safe with. We can be fully ourselves. We can learn to be, I should say, because it takes time, right? We're so used to throwing up all these masks and protective things, and even like protective strategies, like personality things, which I'm using those little air quotes, because so much of our protective strategy we have attributed to personality. Like, that's just who I am. Actually, no, that's a strategy you probably learned very early on to protect the little you. That could be fear. I mean, fear is a protective strategy. It is like, if I just stay ahead of this enough, if I just look out for worst case scenarios, I I can prevent the bad thing from happening because I'm already thinking of it. Like I'm already prepared for it. Anger, rage, like these things are like, I can go big because it makes other people go small. I get power back and it protects that terrified little boy or girl inside. Like we could go through all the things, but in order to be relationally and emotionally safe, we have to create this foundation. And I think that's why we wanted to really talk about this for this whole thing, because I feel it's like mission critical. This is really the hub of the wheel for us. Everything attaches to it. What we do with Tender and Fierce this is the core. What we do with marriage, this is the core. Our relationship with God, our spiritual, like when people say like, I want to have encounters with God, I want to experience him, but I don't know that he even speaks to me. This is the core, because this is, this is it. And so, I feel like, and you keep playing like the same note and I keep repeating it, and I don't want to keep doing that, but I do want to emphasize it's actually probably simpler than you think. Because if you can get this piece right, literally the details fall in line. So like the marriage coaching, I'm super excited for, because we can offer it now to more people. And so if that is a heartbeat of yours, like there's I feel stirred toward that. I feel like there's something agitating. Like right now in my marriage, I feel like I want to read the show notes, reach out, like let's get you moving, because we're going to address the core issue. If an intensive, like to come in real person, we would love to have you. We have a dates available in the fall. So like reach out. We've not really done that publicly ever before, but we have felt this call to go back to this one core thing. And it's shocking what it saves in years of marriage therapy. Because if you get this core thing established, all of your communication stuff, all of your issues, whatever they are can be rooted back to this idea of relational intelligence and what is really at the core, emotional safety.
And I just want to share this too, from even an emotional intelligence perspective, is thinking about your marriage in relation to, let's get out of the weeds for a second and think about end of life. Like if you are a believer, thinking about it in relation to where you will be 1,000 years from now. You see, salvation and commission are two different things. Salvation is when we come to know Jesus. And I find that a lot of times we come to know Jesus and then we sit and we just wait for the world to go to hell in a handbasket and wait for his second coming, wait for the rapture, whatever theology you believe. It's like we're just biding our time until he comes. But the reality is how we live our lives today influences where we will be 1,000 years from now. Not even where we will be, but what we will be doing and the things we'll be ruling and reigning over. I mean, this is very biblical. If you think about the progression, we are living in eternity right now. You are right now living in eternity. And so when you think about your relationships today in relation to eternity and the quality of those relationships over time, even into eternity, we have to believe that how we're treating each other today matters probably more than anything else on this planet. I genuinely believe that how I'm treating people in the here and now and everybody who's in front of me matters more than anything else in this life. Matters more than how much money you'll make, where you live, what you have, who you've surrounded yourself, all those things. It is, what is the effect you're leaving on others after you've left their presence? In other words, how well did you love? And I think that at the end of the day, there's even a passage in Scripture where Jesus says, you cast out demons in my name, you healed people in my name, you did all of these things in my name, and yet I will say, away from me, I never what? Knew you. That's the scariest verse in the Bible for me. Because if I'm doing, and I am not knowing him, man, that's just doing it for what? And so that's the key here. Are we ignited? Is our hearts awakened to knowing him and knowing him alone? And therefore, everything we do, all of our relationships, every person we interact with every day is an overflow of what we've experienced or are experiencing in our love relationship with him. And that is I just wanted to set a bigger picture for this, because I think that the way I'm treating Christy right now, I know that the way that I'm treating Christy right now has significant consequences and implications beyond today and beyond next week and beyond whether or not we're going to have sex because of the way that I'm treating her. Or, I mean, it's just like there's an eternal significance that I am a part of making her heart radiant, clean before the Lord, a pure bride. That are we doing that? Are we living that way? Do we see ourselves being commissioned to go out and make disciples? And so that's huge in my mind. And to what Christy's point is, I mean, this is a core passage of what we will talk about in marriage coaching. Is one of the things that we talk about a lot is James 1:19 and 20. It says, finally, or it doesn't say finally, it says, brothers and sisters, be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. In verse 20, most people never understand or never remember or hear. I'm sure you've heard be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. You may have even heard, yeah, you've been given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. It's like, oh yeah, be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. But verse 20 says this. Why? Because human anger does not accomplish God's righteousness. Human anger does not accomplish God's righteousness. And this is what ends up happening. So when we think about our souls and how we're treating each other, this is Dallas Willard actually writing this, and I wanted to share this. Where does anger come from? Anger, when your will is frustrated, anger is a natural response. It's frustration of the will. Okay. And so when you get angry, the reason it says human anger doesn't accomplish God's righteousness is because we have to be very careful what we do in our anger, how we react in our anger, because anger is very closely matched with contempt. So in other words, if that anger keeps coming up and coming up and coming up, what ends up happening is, and this happens in marriage when resentment builds, and John Gottman found this in his research on the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, contempt is the ultimate wall. Contempt, at that point, it's like, yeah, we're done. Contempt involves regarding someone as lesser than you. And so when you think about that from a spiritual growth perspective, and you think about that from, Philippians 2 says to do not regard yourself more highly than you ought, but consider others better than yourself. Right? Like, consider others ahead of yourself. Consider others more important. Consider others first. Love. In other words, how well did I love other people? The person who has thus surrendered their anger to God discovers that if you stand up for what is good without anger, you will be much more effective. Because anger that degrades into contempt invites a contemptuous response. And what ends up happening in marriage is we get into a contemptuous response cycle because our anger and our resentment has gotten to a place where we have not submitted it to the will of God, and we have not submitted ourselves to the will of God. And it's a delicate balance, and I want to make sure that I'm very careful saying this. It's a delicate balance when you've been hurt over and over and over again, as Christy's describing, because you have to feel safe in order to heal. You have to feel safe in order to grow together. But when you're feeling unsafe, that anger is part of the guardian that keeps you protected, and it keeps you protected, and it keeps you protected. And this is why she's talking about getting to understanding what are the guardians that have protected you, and realizing that those guardians aren't working as well as they used to. In fact, those guardians are beginning to actually create the very thing that is happening that you don't want. And that's where we have to pay attention to our own soul. And man, where am I reacting in anger? Where am I causing my anger? Where am I allowing my anger to cause me to sin? And in how I'm treating other people, and particularly my wife in this process.
Particularly my wife. I think that's the thing, though, like, to just like, this is where that comes out, right? This is the person closest to you, probably. And so those protective things.
That's what's huge.
Yeah, we can cover them up. Like, we're pretty good out there. I mean, you'll see people flare for sure, and you will too. But we can look pretty well managed and pretty well adjusted out there because people aren't getting that close. When you get this close, that's why people are like, why? Like, marriage is so hard. It's just so hard. No, ma'am, sir, it's actually no different than another relationship, except that it gets closer. And it is how beautiful. It's like you went from being looked at through, a camera lens to a microscope. Like it's like getting in on the smallest parts of you and they flare because they're scared. They're protective. And so, yeah, we do crazy stuff to protect ourselves, but I promise you this, and I'm staring straight into this camera because I want you to hear this. The crazy things that you do or the crazy things that your spouse does, it is not who they are. That is not them. This is not personality. This is a learned protective strategy. And that means it can be unlearned. Like if I know anything, I know that. I know that these things, and it not just unlearned, like, oh, I'm going to will myself to learn. How do you unlearn? You actually have to feel safe enough.
This is where relational intelligence comes into play. 100%.
You have to feel safe enough. And we do this in Tender and Fierce for the women. It's brain rewiring and it's nervous system regulation, and it works. You add the Holy Spirit, you add like literally the person of Jesus, and every single one of us is designed to heal. We are not stuck. I don't ever understand why we talk about neuroplasticity, like the term plastic. I think I was talking to Landon the other day about how plastic our brains are. And he's like, that doesn't make sense to me. I'm like, I know, it's kind of a strange concept, but meaning moldable, changeable, not stuck, not fixed. The more we walk the loops and we keep doing them, we ingrain them. Yes, but it doesn't mean they're permanent or stuck. And so like, I have never felt more hope. And I think that's why it has given us this like renewed juice to do more work in marriage, because marriage stuff is tricky. I'll just be flat out honest. I know so many people that are like, yeah, I'll do any kind of, I won't do that. It's hard because it's two people's things sparking each other, right? So it's like two dysregulated people, but you get to the bottom of that dysregulation of that, it's a fear response.
And you get your marriage
everything changes.
You get your marriage together, man.
Yeah.
You set the world on fire.
Yeah, everything changes.
And we work a lot with leaders, and I was just even talking to some leaders today. And this is the thing. It's like we are leading our ministry, our business. We're leading our employees. We're leading our people, and then we go home and we lead our kids. And what we don't have anything left for each other.
Right.
And that's the norm, but I want to encourage you in something. The reason that's the case is because you feel safest with your spouse. You know the other person's not going anywhere. You're not, it's like, but yet what ends up happening is we take it for granted, and then the overflow of the quality of this relationship actually starts to bleed into the others.
Right.
Because it can only sustain outside in for so long. It's the same thing with personal growth. It has to come from inside out in order for it to be sustainable. If it's outside in, you will eventually collapse. You'll get sick. Something will happen.
Yeah.
It has to be inside out. And it's the same thing in the home. Your marriage has to be the strongest. It has to be the priority relationship, because when you're famous at home, you will therefore then thrive on your stage. When you're famous at home, you will thrive on your stage. And the saying has been true ever since we started this podcast: the greatest red carpet you'll ever walk is through your front door. And that phrase, that idea is that when you are prioritizing that marital relationship, it overflows into the relationship with your kids, and it will overflow into the relationship with your employees and those you minister to, or whatever it is that you're called to. It will overflow onto your stage. You're first famous at home so you can thrive on your stage. And that's how that overflow works. So anyway, I hope this was a helpful introduction for you into relational intelligence. Again, we brought up marriage as a core relationship that we need to be paying attention to. But I wanted to make sure also we'll get more into marriage because we're going to talk about sex. We're going to talk about forgiveness. There's going to be some topics that we specifically get into on relational intelligence that are really, really important and core to living this out. But the reason I wanted to really also give a 30,000 foot view into what is the eternal significance of our relationships and our souls coming alive. That is a major part of this. And if you're only seeing, it's so easy to get stuck, as Christy said earlier, it's so easy to just get stuck in the here and now with the struggles that we're faced with, kids not acting a certain way, not coming together correctly with each other and coming into agreement with how we raise our kids, whatever it is, that it's like we get so caught up in the day to day that we miss the forest for the trees. And true growth and true coming alive and you being a light in the world and experiencing yourself as a light in the world is not missing the forest for the trees. It's being able to see the forest and starting there so that you can come together, because from that point forward, everything else is going to come together differently. Because there's a whole new mission and a whole new vision and a whole new purpose for why you're doing the work to begin with. And so we would love for you to check out the marriage coaching. You can check that out in the show notes. If there's space available, we would love to have you be a part of that. And if there's not space available, we will create a wait list. But also, I want to encourage you that if this is your coaching that you are doing, we really encourage you to walk away from this episode, write down what was the most useful takeaway for you. What was your most useful takeaway today? Go talk to your spouse about it. Go talk to a mentor about it. Go talk to somebody that you can be accountable to apply your most useful takeaway from today's episode. And until next week, we want you to keep in mind, I'm going to actually use this phrase today, that the greatest red carpet you will ever walk is through your front door. We'll see you next week.
All the fear